You're watching ACT-TV. I'm Julianna Forlano. It's hard to believe, but the 2020 election is basically right around the corner. It's been a rough primary season, but the general is going to be even harder to stomach if thousands of voters can't vote because our names have been taken off the polls or because they closed down our polling places. But according to today's guest, Greg Palast, that is a very real possibility. Greg's new book, How Trump Stole 2020, will be out soon, in July 14th. Greg is known for his investigative reports for the BBC, The Guardian, Rolling Stone. He has other bestsellers. I'm sure you know, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. Greg, thanks for coming on the program today.
Glad to be with you. And I want to tell people that even though my book is called How Trump Stole 2020, and by the way, I encourage you to get it now because it's your antidote to the Trumpdemic. It's basically how we can bust the burglary. And the reason I say it's already been stolen, you have to understand, Juliana, that in the last 2 years, 16.7 million people, almost 17 million people have been purged, removed, erased from the voter rolls. So, you're going to try to get your mail-in ballot and you don't get it. I mean, the biggest problem of mailing in a ballot, by the way, is if you don't get the ballot, you can't mail it in. So 17 million people have lost their right to vote. Very few of those 17 million know it. You're going to go in, you're going to try to vote, you're going to try to get an absentee ballot, you won't get it, or you'll wait in line 3 hours and you'll say, oh, I didn't get a ballot. And they'll say, because you're not registered anymore. So they're going to give you something called a provisional ballot, which is pretty much a bouncing ballot. Juliana, one of the dirty secrets of American democracy is we don't count all the ballots. So for example, 3 million people were shunted to provisional ballots last year. Excuse me, not last year, in 2016. This is from the government figures. And
I was one of those people.
Just short of 1 million, about 935,000, just short of 1 million of those ballots cast provisionally were thrown in the garbage. Officially, that's the official count from the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission. 1 million ballots thrown in the garbage. That's provisional. And by the way, New York and California are bad on throwing away ballots. And then you have ballots, but the problem is it's not just everyone's ballot is thrown in the garbage. Overwhelmingly, every study shows, and I was looking at the MIT studies, you're looking at the 250 to 300% more likely to lose your ballot or get a provisional ballot and have it thrown out if you're Hispanic or African American than if you're white. So you're 2.5 times more likely to have your ballot just thrown in the garbage if you're not a white voter. So this is the game that's being played, but we can bust. First of all, we can bust it. One, read the book, How Trump Stole 2020, so you can unsteal it. And then second, at the back of it, there's 7 ways to beat the ballot bandits. And that includes, by the way, something everyone should do while they're watching this in the corner of the screen. If you're a multitasker, or wait till after, check your registration, for God's sake. Millions of people are not registered. In fact, the book opens with, and you can see at gregpalast.com, a 92-year-old woman, Christine Ford. I was with her at the polling stations in Atlanta, Georgia, 92 years old. And this is going to be her 50th year of voting at that station, 50 years of voting at one station. And they said, no, you can't vote here at this time. You're not registered. You lost your... They literally wiped her off the registries. I was there in Atlanta. Her niece is in tears, totally freaking out. And I find out, and so I went to her house that evening, and I see all these pictures of Martin Luther King. I said, did you get to see King preach? She says, well, no, he just came over after dinner because it was Martin Luther King's cousin.
Wow.
Martin Luther King's cousin. 50 years of voting in the same place, thrown out. So she didn't check her registration beforehand. Why would she?
Why would she? After 50 years. Yeah, I think people who are watching, myself included, are like, but I just voted. And that's what happened to me last time when I was kicked over to provisional. I got there, same place I always voted. And they're like, we don't know who you are. And then the next time they did, which is highly unusual. I don't understand how that even happened.
That's
odd. odd.
And so, yeah, it's happening all over. I know that yesterday I spoke with with Neil Rosenstein, who's the chief voting rights attorney for the New York Public Interest Research Group. His daughter was shoved over to a provisional ballot. And you so notice
Throw out
an
ballots.
expert lawyer with you. You
Mhm.
can't save your vote sometimes. So I'm asking you to try to save it now, because on election day, even if your daddy's a big shot voting rights lawyer, they're going to shunt you to that bouncing placebo ballot, the provisional ballot. So you'll think because the reason I call it placebo ballot, Julianna, is that it lets you think you voted
Right.
when, of course, you have.
Really
Well, you opened the book by letting America off the hook for voting for Donald Trump, which I thought was very kind of you. Can you explain how he lost both the popular vote and the Electoral College, but he remains our president?
When I say he lost the Electoral College, what I mean is if you counted the uncounted votes in America, and I just told you about votes that don't get counted in America, if you counted the uncounted votes and you allowed people to vote who were blocked from voting, and this is our big problem. We still have apartheid elections in America, Julianna, and it's a so if you count those people, so let me give you an example. Let's take a couple states, Wisconsin and Michigan. Now, as you know, Trump only won because he squeaked by in Wisconsin with 10,700 votes. Excuse me, that was Michigan, where he squeaked by with 10,700 votes. Now, in Detroit, yeah, okay, so he supposedly won by just 10,000 votes out of 5 million cast. The answer is 78,355 ballots. 75,355
That's
ballots
more than
were
10,000.
never counted in Detroit.
Wow.
Never counted in the city of Detroit. Now, how did that happen? It happened because 87 scanning machines, they vote on paper there, 87 of the scanning machines in Detroit broke down. They didn't work. They didn't read the ballots. And therefore, because they couldn't read, you can fill out a ballot, but if it's not read by the scanner, it doesn't count. Now, you could say, well, we don't know who the people of Detroit voted for. Motown, these are Trump voters.
They're going for Trump, I'll tell you right now. I mean, how is it that we need a machine to look at a piece of paper in order to verify it? We have
Now you're getting even closer. So if you read in the book about a chapter called Michigan Michigas and how Trump's won 2020, which is that, okay, so the 87 scanning machines broke down. And by the way, when they broke down in Detroit, the city clerk of Detroit, before, and I want to emphasize, before the election, told the state, these machines, we have old machines, they're going to break down. We need money for new machines. But the Republican governor at the time, Rick Snyder, said, because they were in bankruptcy. Detroit was not allowed to buy new machines without state approval. The state wouldn't give them approval because Republicans. And of course, 87 machines broke down. 75,000 Detroiters lost their vote. And of course, it's Motown. I actually spoke to some of these voters. Carlos Garcia, who's a systems analyst there, a young Hispanic voter. He's in a precinct that's basically all young people and voters of color. That's it. And for 2 hours, he saw like 100 ballots thrown into a machine, bypassing the broken scanner, so the votes didn't get counted. And by the way, Jill Stein tried to get those votes counted. We called it the recount. Remember, people talked about the Michigan recount. It wasn't a recount. It was an attempt to count those ballots that were never counted in the first place.
Wow.
And Donald Trump blocked the count because Hillary would have won Michigan. Absolutely no question. Donald Trump went to court, blocked the count, saying, well, Jill Stein is not allowed to recount ballots or count the uncounted ballots is what it was. Jill Stein can't do that because you can count them 100 times. She'll never win. It's only up to Hillary Clinton. The court asked Clinton's lawyers, do you want these ballots counted? And her lawyers said, oh, we're just here to observe, which of course was her campaign slogan. But it's, it's
why on earth did she not have them counted?
Tell me about it. Well, it's just like when, some people remember that I'm the reporter that broke this story in 2000, how Catherine Harris, who was the Republican Secretary of State, it was George Bush versus Al Gore, and Bush became president of the United States by literally just 537 votes. But that was after they knocked out about 58,000 black people from the voter rolls of Florida, saying that they were felons, criminals not allowed to vote at the time.
Mm.
In fact, not one, zero, bupkis, nothing, zero illegal voters, but their crime was voting while black, and that elected George W. Bush as president. And here we are again with the same type of games, removing voters of color from the voter rolls. And other games. Yeah. Now we have, in 2000, it was illegal to ask for a voter for their ID. Americans were trusted. You went and you signed your name. And we didn't have massive fraud, but now we have voter ID laws. But here's the lovely one. Wisconsin. Now, supposedly, Donald Trump won Wisconsin. There again, by 22,000 votes, a fragment out of 3 million cast. But here was the problem. The uncast votes, the votes that were never cast, because 2 weeks, and this is in the book too, 2 weeks before the presidential election 2016, Michigan changed its voter ID laws. It now required a state voter ID. Fine, except here's the problem. They define what is a legal voting ID, but a student ID from the University of Wisconsin, even though it's a photo ID issued by the state, does not count to vote. 182,000.
Is happening to the town. Hold on a second, Greg. Messiah, I've seen the background there, but there's some crazy feedback going on. Is that
from my end?
I don't think so.
Am I echoing? Echoing?
You're better. Okay, repeat. Right. I'm sure he fixed it.
So I just wanted to say that, so 2 weeks before the presidential election in 2016, they changed the voter ID laws of Wisconsin, and you say they have to have a state photo ID to vote, but the state photo ID issued by the University of Wisconsin to 182,000 students did not count. So suddenly you lost 182,000 students, plus the new ID law disenfranchised about 50,000 African Americans, mostly in Milwaukee, because you could use your driver's license, but if you are a low-income urban resident in Milwaukee and you take a bus and you don't own a car, you don't have a driver's license. You just lost your vote. So,
Greg,
this is how Trump won Wisconsin. I won Michigan, Pennsylvania, same games, and how he's taking it again. But we can bust the burglary. That's what I'm telling people.
All right, we're going to get to how do we bust it, besides just right now going to check, like literally right this second, going to check on the internets whether you are registered at this moment. Everyone, Greg is suggesting that everyone do it, even if you just voted yesterday in the New York primary or whatever you've been.
And especially, and by the way, if you think you voted in the New York primary, because that's the other thing, is a lot of people, I know that a lot of people asked for mail-in ballots and didn't get them, and they're wondering why. And it could be that you have been removed from the voter rolls and you don't know why. Now, back in 2016, 125,000 residents of Brooklyn were illegally scrubbed from the voter rolls.
This one.
Yeah, and New York Public Interest Group sued and got people back on after the fact, after the election.
Do you know if they were mostly Democrats? Because I just voted for Bernie in the primary or something like that. I'm like, I wonder if they're scrubbing Bernie people out of Brooklyn.
And that was, this is a continuing problem. And by the way, while I write about the Trumpitos and it's mostly the GOP, which has been stealing votes from voters of color and young people, because if you get rid of voters of color and young people, obviously that favors the GOP. But however, I do have a chapter on how Democrats remove young people and voters of color. But that's because they're trying to win primaries in California. Here, I'm in LA. We're in the People's Republic of California. There's only one party here, the Democrats, but it's really two parties. There's the old line with, Jerry Brown and they did their very best to knock out, and you'll see in my chapter in How Trump Stole 2020 called California Reman, how
nice.
How the Secretary of State of California, who was helping run the campaign first for Hillary Clinton, then for Joe Biden. He's running the campaign while he's running the election for the state. And over 500,000 Bernie Sanders voters lost their votes. It was
Mm.
unbelievable. And I did that analysis with the top voting statisticians in California. 500,000 Bernie Sanders voters didn't get what in California, the way they work is they mail you a ballot. But in California, unless you specifically ask if you're an independent, one of the 4 million independent voters, if you don't ask for like a special ballot that allows you to vote in the Democratic primary, which you're entitled to do by law, you get a ballot without the presidential candidates. So you had over 3 million people receive ballots without Bernie Sanders' name on it. And they freaked out. But this was engineered by the state of California. So in other words, I'm telling you, yes, the Democrats do it too. However, the Democrats do it to each other. They were going out of their way. They had to knock out Hispanic voters because, as you know, Bernie Sanders was like the overwhelming choice of T.O. T.O. Bernie was the choice of the Hispanic voters in California. So they had to knock it out. So while the book is truly nonpartisan, or it goes after everyone, but it's important to understand that we do have this tremendous problem still of racism in voting in America, and that's what we're trying to go after. We're back to the question: do Black votes matter?
I was just going to say that, but I wasn't sure we were like allowed to do it. I wouldn't want to offend a movement, but Black votes mattering. It leads to Black lives mattering. So they're synonymous.
That's important. I was just actually Latasha Brown, co-founder of Black Votes Matter, had asked me to. I joined her. I was giving a lecture actually at Harvard University a few months ago, and by Skype, of course. And no, when you see what happens, for example, in Atlanta. I was just on the phone with the ACLU out of Georgia, and speaking to Andrea Young, who's their executive director, as she points out, if you take away people's votes, then you have these police killings. You can't take away people's lives unless you take away their families' votes and their community's votes, because otherwise they'll do something about it. If you're going to kill people's kids, you better take away their right to vote to stop you from doing it. So Greg, it all goes together.
What is with the fact that there is literally no outcry over what is happening? I mean, I'm outcrying now, and I'm hoping that the people who are watching on our platforms and anywhere you go to speak will begin an outcry. But it's an outcry forms when one person, it's like, are we just emotionally unable to have an outcry over something that's like a longer term issue?
Well, I think because here's the problem. The truth is that vote thievery or vote suppression, as some people call it. I don't say that because someone steals your car. You don't say, my car's been suppressed. But it's okay. Vote thievery, vote suppression. It's a racial issue for the most part. And so if it ain't your race, you're not going to get too shaken up. Plus, I got to tell you, think about it. If you really let everyone vote, you'd have as we discussed with the California example, you'd have a very, very different Democratic Party. It would have a very, very different look. So they're not too crazy about it. But the truth is you can't rely on political parties to save your vote. The incumbents got elected by the system that's there. And you change that system, they won't be incumbents anymore. It doesn't matter what party. But I do have to say, I'm still, and you can't say that no one's taken up the cudgel in the Democratic Party. We do have Stacey Abrams.
I was just going to ask you about that. You worked with her.
Yeah, and so Stacey Abrams, for example, hired the Greg Palast investigations team to help her in federal lawsuits with her nonpartisan organization. I couldn't give her any help while she was running for office, and she runs for office again. I can't give her any help because I'm nonpartisan. Mm-hmm. But it's very important. But the important thing there is that we had a Democratic Party politician who, for the first time in my memory, actually stood up and said, I would have won my election if not for these racist Jim Crow tactics. And she specifically cited my work in the book. By the way, in How Trump Stole 2020, I have an interview with Stacey Abrams from a couple years ago, which is really good. The reason I like that is that she wasn't kind of running for anything, and we could just talk without her being, politically careful. And then I went to see her opponent, Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp. Now, the reason I make fun of his accent, I don't make fun of Southern accents per se, but his I do, because he just made up this accent. He used to have a very,
What?
soft Southern Jimmy Carter, New South accent. Then he decided to go full hayseed to run for governor. And he used to have blue suits and the red tie, the New South look. And then he changed it for farmer shirts and old jeans. And he
The old South.
got a big shotgun and he bought himself a pickup truck. And he had these commercials, that he said, I got me this is a quote, I'm not exaggerating, by the way. He goes, I got me a pickup truck so I can round up illegals myself and bring them in if I have to. I just said that. It's like, so, this kind of racist dog whistles, etc. And
This is insane.
And so he was in charge of the voter rolls of Georgia, Brian Kemp, and he removed. I remember at the beginning of our program, we talked about Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin. He removed her from the voter roll and another 340,000 other people illegally. I caught him. I busted him. And at least Stacey Abrams said, if not for removing these 340,000 of my voters, I would have won because there's only a few thousand votes difference. The problem is that it's great to hear from Stacey Abrams, who was the first Black woman ever to run for governor of any American state. And that's great. And I've heard from people like Alcee Hastings, the dean of the Congressional Black Caucus. I would like to hear from the Congressional White Caucus.
Yeah.
That's what we're missing.
Mm-hmm.
We need those white leaders to step forward. And they're seeing it too much as a racial issue, to the point where a lot of African-American politicians, including, by the way, Barack Obama, didn't want to touch the issue publicly because it is seen as so much of a racial issue. I think it should be seen as an American issue.
Everyone said Barack Obama is our first Black president. He's, the right was like, he's Black. Oh my God. So I wish he would have just embraced those issues. He had an opportunity. It's too bad he shrunk from that position.
Yeah, I'd wished that he'd taken a different position, but that's not my job. I will say you have to understand his position, which is that running as the first Black man for president. And by the way, I'm not guessing, because I was writing for a Rolling Stone with Bobby Kennedy, and I can't call up Obama, but Kennedy could. And basically he understood exactly what was going on with the theft of the vote. But his view was, just outvote them. Now in his case, in 2008, I calculated very, very carefully that he was ripped off by about 5.9 million votes, but he won. He just crushed the steal. He did it in 18, as you'll read in the book, in 12. He crushed the steal. That doesn't mean that votes weren't stolen. Because they'll say, well, what about Obama? So his view was, don't cry, overcome it. And I want to tell you that there couldn't have been a state more hostile to young voters or African-American voters than Wisconsin. Under Scott Walker, the Koch's toy boy governor, under Scott Walker and a Republican legislature, which did everything on the planet to erase voters, block voters, stop student voters, change IDs. You thought Wisconsin voting was something like Alabama 1956. And yet Scott Walker was thrown out on his keister. This is important. They can't steal all the votes all the time. So your vote, and it's very important that you protect your vote and the people you know. Again, check your vote. Get the book, How Trump Stole 2020. The reason I say that is that, and by the way, I'm unashamed to advertise it, because 100% of proceeds go to my foundation, the Palast Investigative Fund.
Well, we're here to help you.
Keep this going.
We're here to help you promote it. How Trump Stole 2020 is the book. We're speaking with investigative journalist Greg Palast. Greg, what can we do to make sure we don't fall prey to this voter purging? I know at the end of the book, you had some suggestions. You made the one about right now, go and make sure you are registered. Even if you think you are, make sure that you definitely are. Greg, question, Are people finding out that they are not registered, and then when they re-register, then they're more likely to be on the rolls if they register sort of?
If you read, okay, here's the trick. They purge you off the rolls, but they're not that sophisticated. If you re-sign up, they don't. It's almost it's very, very rare that they'll take you off a second time.
Okay.
They take you because what happens is they now have a record, what's called a contact. It's very strange to the voting biz. If you make a contact to your, as they say, to your voting office, to your board of elections or whatever, and that could just mean checking your, checking to see that you're still registered. That protects your registration. So literally going on the site and putting in your name will also preserve it. But it re-registered. By the way, that included me. I went in and I checked because I was showing on air on another program. Well, here's how you do it. You go to your Secretary of State's office, your Board of Elections, type in your name, address, birth date, and it said Greg Palast, no such voter here in California. So I re-signed up again, and I got my vote, and I got my ballot in the mail. And again, if you're not registered, if you don't, and that's the other thing I want to talk about is the dangers of mail-in voting. Now, people misunderstand when I talk about the dangers of going postal. They think I'm saying don't go, don't mail in your ballot. Well, here's the problem. You don't mail in your ballot and you stand in line for 5 hours with sick people, you could die. So I don't want you to die voting, but I don't want you to lose your vote either. So number one, you better check your registration so that you don't end up in the position where your ballot never arrives. Second, chase down your ballot. Some states allow you to hunt down the status of your request for a mail-in vote. If you don't get a card in the mail that says, do you want a mail-in ballot? And if it looks like junk mail, you might miss it. So you have to, again, just like you have to go and register, you have to go and request that mail-in ballot. And when you get the mail-in ballot, for God's sake, now here's the rough one, 22%, that's more than 1 in 5 mail-in ballots, never get counted, my friends, never get counted, 22%. That's according to the MIT Caltech study of absentee ballots. Right. The number one reason that ballots don't get counted, mail-in ballots don't get counted, is that you don't receive them in the first place. So also, if you have moved at all, and I mean even in your own building, while the law says you don't have to re-register if you move within your same neighborhood, you are a fool if you don't re-register, even if you've registered, moved in the same building. Because number one, if you're doing a mail-in ballot and you've moved, you ain't getting the ballot. It's not going to forward.
Greg, how close to the election do you have? How much time do we have to re-register before November? When's the cutoff?
In the lovely America, it's every state is different. So that, but in most cases, it's usually 30 days before. New York is a longer period of time, so you always check. So check now and then check again before the election, usually before 30 days before the election. So you want to check at the end of September. Now, I want to be careful about that because I believe New York and some other places have even a longer cutoff, that it's much, much longer before the election. Some states now, like California for the first time, have same day registration, but I wouldn't start trying to register to vote on election day unless that's your only recourse. But by the way, in some states, you do have same day election, so that if they say you're not on the voter rolls, weirdly in California, they didn't tell people who came in to vote, by the way, if you're not on the voter rolls, instead of filling out a provisional ballot, we'll just register you right now. You can be registered right on the spot. So there's some states, please do that if you have that chance.
Oh, I don't trust California anymore anyway, even if they have the right of way, because of what you just said 5 minutes ago. Greg, what are some of the other things that people can do so that we don't, as a country, fall prey to this voter purging? I know we don't have a ton of time left, but if you can.
No, I would say one of the big things, I want everyone to be careful when you get the mail-in ballot. Now it's dangerous stuff, because mail-in ballots aren't just, as I say, it's not just pick and lick. You don't just pick a candidate, lick a stamp and send it in. You now have this envelope that you have to fill out every single item on the envelope. In some cases, it's 15 items, including, it says driver's license number. And in a lot of states, if you don't put if you have no license, you better say no driver's license. If you leave it blank, you lose your vote. Find out how many stamps you need. In most states, the ballot has 2 stamps. and you're going to lose it all if you don't. If you put on one stamp,
Mm.
100,000 people lost their vote because of postage dues.
Wow, that is absolutely insane.
There's a bunch of things you can do, but the main thing is check your registration, check your ballot when you fill it out, and hunt it down. If you're not getting your ballot in the mail, you better hunt it down, and always bring. Even though in many states they're not allowed to ask you for ID, if you're Black and you're young, you better bring your ID because they're going to ask you for it. I know that. In New York, for example, if you're not a first-time voter in New York, you should never be asked for an ID. Neil Rosenstein's daughter, I won't give her name, but he's public. Again, the New York Public Interest Research Group's voting rights lawyer, his daughter was not only denied the regular ballot, but his daughter was also asked for a photo voter ID in New York, where it's illegal to ask for an ID except for a first-time voter. So, this is what they do. 67% of Black men get asked for a vote for an ID when they go to vote, even though in most states there is no voter ID requirement.
We've been speaking with Greg Palast, investigative journalist. His new book coming out on the 14th of July, but you can probably pre-order How Trump Stole 2020. Follow Greg online on his Twitter at Greg_Palast, Palast. And you can also catch his reports on gregpalast.com. Those are always very interesting and informative, but also entertaining, as I always enjoy, the tone that you take, even when we're doing very serious subjects. So yeah. Thanks a lot, Greg.
I grin when it's grim. Okay, Julianna, you're the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You're watching ACT TV. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. We'll bring you talkers like this several times a week, sometimes 8, sometimes 10. We also have a whole bunch of other stuff on our YouTube channel checking out. If you like Julianna Forlano, that's me. I can be found on social media wherever Julianna Forlanos are found. We do this Facebook show live on Facebook at 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Thursday. We're also usually on Twitch from 9:30 a.m. Eastern to 11:30 a.m. Eastern. But today we are dark on Twitch in solidarity with people who are trying to bring attention to the fact that the gaming and gaming platforms are often not a safe space when it comes to sexual harassment. So we are dark on that platform today. We will be back here and on Twitch tomorrow. Thanks for watching. See you later.